with $492 billion in assets under management. Mercer Executive Director, Global Chief Investment Strategist, Rich Nuzum. Rich, I laid out, we didn't get to Trey there, but I kind of laid out the tensions that we're seeing right now. And, you know, if Israel strikes Iran, I want to get your reaction to what that could mean for the commodities market. And then obviously these negotiations are happening this weekend again.
Yeah, so I think three headline comments specifically on oil. One is oil's still down, although it's up today. It's down about 7% year to date in U.S. dollars, which is down about 10% against a basket of currencies. So that's disinflationary in the rest of the world. It's pro-growth. That's good news. The bad news, as you pointed out, is oil's up a lot this week, about 10% within this week, on concerns that there will be conflict between Israel and Iran. And then longer term, if we get a settlement with Iran, a deal with Iran that eliminates sanctions on the Iranian oil sector or relaxes sanctions, if we get reinvestment from global players into the Iranian oil sector, or if we get a peace settlement around Ukraine or even a ceasefire around Ukraine that reduces sanctions against the Russian oil sector, then long term that could drive oil prices way down. So we're still down a bit. We're up a little bit on this conflict spike, and then we have the possibility of a tail scenario where oil prices drop, which would be disinflationary and pro-growth for most of the world. And that's one of the things that's driving markets to actually be higher year to date, despite all the uncertainty around trade. I
know. I have to say, the skeptic in me says that I think we're far apart from letting the Iranians meaningfully ship out oil, but they're doing it illegally, as are the Russians. Those are unmarked tankers that they're sending out, and that's how Vladimir Putin is funding the war against Ukraine. And that oil is out on the market, to be clear.
The oil's getting in the market.
Just not legally.
But they don't. The Russians have been starved for kind of global technology and investment for a few years. Yeah. The Iranians have been starved for decades, and so they're not producing from the fields the way that they could if they had help.
Rich, stay here really quick. I want to bring back in Trey Yingst. We had a communication, Trey, with you earlier, but just real quick, want to get an update on what we're looking at this weekend as far as Iran and Israel. Trey.
Yeah, Cheryl, absolutely. Reports right now do indicate that Israel is preparing to strike Iranian nuclear facilities. And this comes amid the backdrop of ongoing nuclear talks that are set to resume on Sunday in Oman. As a result, the U.S. has ordered a partial evacuation of the American embassy in Baghdad, since it could be a target of any sort of Iranian response to an Israeli strike. Now, the State Department also authorized non-essential personnel and dependents of Americans serving in places like Bahrain and Kuwait. We also understand that here in Israel, the U.S. Embassy has restricted domestic travel for embassy staff and family members outside of major cities like Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and Beersheba. These precautions are all signs that the Americans are preparing for a deteriorating security situation. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff is still scheduled for that meeting on Sunday. It'll be the sixth round of nuclear talks as observers try to understand if these new warnings are a way to pressure the Iranian regime or if military action is imminent. Now, President Trump was asked today about the possibility of an Israeli strike, saying this.
Yeah, it's a very fair question. Look, I want to have an agreement with Iran. We're fairly close to an agreement. We are fairly close to a pretty good agreement. It's got to be better than pretty good, though, but it's got to be, I'd much prefer an agreement.
Today, the International Atomic Energy Agency passed a resolution saying that Iran is not complying with obligations about its nuclear program. It's the first time in 20 years that such a resolution has been passed and marks an important development ahead of Sunday's renewed talks. Now, in response to that IAEA decision, Iran said today they will start enriching uranium at a third site in their country. Cheryl?
Which is a key problem for the Trump administration. Trey Yingst, thank you so much for establishing connection with us. Great to see you, Trey Yingst. Thank you for that live report. So, Rich, back to you on that. Your reaction to what he reported.
I think the market's going to continue to pay a lot of attention to this with the possibility of disruption of oil supply. Long term, it will also have an impact on the possibility of broader peace in the Middle East and that reinvestment that we talked about.
We've been talking a lot about the U.S.-China trade deals. We really don't have any answers yet. We're still kind of waiting. But you're highlighting the U.K. economy, because I've been told by other sources of mine that the trade deal we should be looking at, besides China, is the U.K. trade deal.
I think the U.K. trade deal matters hugely because it sets a floor. And most of the U.S.'s trading partners expect to get a deal that looks like the U.K. deal, which would not be hugely distorted to global trade or if we get, say, 10% tariffs with exceptions across most of the planet, That's not a huge deal. We all are used to paying sales taxes, value-added taxes, and this should just have the same economic impact on just part of what we buy in the U.S. But all eyes are on China and the U.S. because those are the two world's largest economies. They have talked past each other for the last few years. And over the last 3 decades, the China-U.S. symbiosis has driven global economic progress. China's been a top-performing economy globally. The U.S. has been the top-performing economy in the G7. If the U.S. and China can get along better again and have freer trade and collaborate on scientific progress, then the whole world benefits from that. If they can't, if they continue to play off as adversaries, then that has implications for global economic growth going forward, not just U.S. and Chinese economic growth.
And you made a good point to me in the commercial break that the two sides keep talking past each other. And I know what you're saying because you keep getting different statements. They sound totally different in what they're saying to each other. Just final word here on this.
Yeah, I first backpacked around China as a graduate student in economics in 1992 when China had $250 per year per capita income. So in one generation, they've gone from third world to first.
Wow.
It's really hard to underestimate how different the cultures are.
That's a great point, Rich. Thank you so much.